And welcome back. It's the Conservation Games. Yes, but today we don't have a game. We have a very, very special segment where we have people who are doing amazing work in conservation. We've got Ivan Carter, a Zimbabwean-born conservationist who's done amazing work, of course, in his career in terms of conservation. We'll be with him. We've got Team Lion, who have been very hungry so far in the competition and doing well for themselves. And I've got the captain, Hilton Mudariki, who's going to introduce themselves. And of course, a few of his team members before we get into today's nitty-gritties. Hilton?
Yeah, my name is Hilton Mudariki. I'm a professional rugby player. I play for Jersey Reds in the United Kingdom, and I'm also Sable's captain at the moment. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to the next couple of weeks of this journey. Obviously, having a lot of fun with everyone here. But most importantly, to support the guys out in the front line that are doing an amazing job.
So today we talked about our special guest. We've got Ivan Carter. I'm going to give Ivan the tools at the moment to be able to speak. And Ivan, just let us know a little bit about yourself and what you'll be telling us today.
Hey, well, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for checking in. Let's take a 60,000 foot view. So I thought I'd give you three kind of points that I think, if we really boil it down, are the points that I think, or that I wish people were discussing more. And the first one is, what is conservation? Conservation has to relate to the entire ecosystem. If my conservation efforts are only on a rhino or a chimpanzee or a giraffe or a lion, and I'm not conserving the ecosystem for that animal to sustainably live in, then my effort's going to be for nothing. And then the next thing I wanted to just kind of throw out there is, if we're honest about it, there's only 5 ways that we can use a patch of land. We can either settle on it, which completely changes it. We can build roads and highways and factories and whatever else humans build on natural ecosystems. We can farm it, which means everything gets changed.
Yeah.
If there's minerals there, we can mine it. If there's the right timber there, we can log it. Both of those are going to modify it significantly, which leaves us with only one thing left to use that land for that's going to leave it intact, and that is tourism. We've got to do it responsibly. So irresponsible non-hunting tourism is as bad as irresponsible hunting tourism. It's all tourism, and neither of those things lead to conservation. It's the money that they generate that can be used for conservation, and that's a really important point. Then the last point I wanted to really raise, and I kind of touched on it on the group yesterday, was the 3 greatest threats to our natural ecosystems. The exploding human population around the world. The reality is there's more people on the planet today than ever before. There's less ecosystem. So that's threat number 1. Threat number 2 is, funnily enough, social media. So if a policymaker, if a politician gets enough letters, they are going to change policy. So somebody can send a particular photo out on the internet and say, this shouldn't be allowed, vote to stop this. That can undo what good science has been building for years and years and years. So armchair conservationists driven by social media is our second greatest threat. And the third greatest threat is one that I think makes everybody feel small when you say it. It's the thought that someone else will save it.
Okay, sorry, Ivan, can I just... can you just give a rundown of, you say you got 4 non-for-profit organizations. Whereabouts are they and what are they called? If you wouldn't mind letting us know.
As has happened here with Conservation Games, what a great thing to have happen, because people have got up and done something. So Giraffe Conservation Foundation is a small organization but highly effective, and we operate in every ecosystem that giraffe exists, except for South Africa. And the reason not for South Africa is because giraffe, because of the private ownership, are very stable in South Africa. Then we run a chimpanzee sanctuary in the southeastern DRC, where we take chimpanzees from the illegal trade in baby pets, in baby animals for the exotic pet trade. And we also look after a big national park there, an equatorial rainforest that's got eastern lowland gorillas in it. So that's our second project. The third project is in Qatada 11 in Mozambique. It's right where the Zambezi goes into the ocean. And it's a place that was completely devoid of wildlife until about 25 years ago. And through just good conservation, science, anti-poaching, and everything else that happens, that's where we reintroduced the lions. And we've seen about a 3,000% increase in wildlife there.
Wow.
And then the fourth project is the Southern African Wildlife College, which trains people from local communities how to make a living and how to care about ecosystems and conservation.
Very nice.
So through that, we train over 1,000 people a year from 44 countries around Africa, everything from park management to sustainable use to game rangers to training ecologists how to do proper studies to, lodge management. Absolutely everything that you would require. They run a large series of courses. Anything that trains conservation is taught at the Southern African Wildlife College.
Good. Ivan, just picking up on something that you just mentioned, I've got a question following on from that. Do you guys find challenges sometimes trying to work in certain countries?
Let me tell you, Tino, I never thought that I would ever be a guy that could successfully operate in DRC. The politics, the logistics, the infrastructure, it is just absolutely, it's incredible. It's taken us 1.5 years just to set up a very small, not-for-profit business there. So yeah, absolutely an incredible challenge on many levels.
Right. Gary, thanks a lot for your question. The floor is open.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, you may, Daryl.
I speak a lot to Mark Boucher on his rhino conservation down here, and it's a thankless task on what everybody does in your realm. It is quite something, to be honest.
Yeah, guys, just a question. Obviously, Ivan, thanks very much. It's great to hear from you and great to see what you're doing from the front lines. To be honest, before this, I've heard of you, didn't know much what you did, but obviously reading up, it's fantastic to see what you're actually doing. The question I had, maybe you can answer, or Luke and Robin, because you guys are doing a fantastic job as well by creating this platform. But the question I wanted to ask is, okay, it's great fun that we've joined this platform and obviously catching up with everyone. And in a way, it's promoting it. But how are we actually promoting it? I just want to see, okay, you've asked me to join this platform and have fun in this conservation games. But how are we actually helping to conservation? Is it by this platform online and it's creating an awareness, or are we trying to get funding? I know there's a link that you can go where people can start funding, but it's quite difficult sitting at home feeling like, okay, I'm taking part in the games, but how is it actually helping towards? This is the question I've been asking myself.
Yeah, maybe we can come on that one, Trav. Thanks very much putting it in the spot. Yeah, Trav, look, the main thing, Robin and I were sitting together probably 4 weeks ago. And, our business is at the moment, tourism. There's not a single tourist coming here into Vic Falls. And Robin and I have wanted to be sort of more directly involved in conservation for some time. And we came together and said, look, let's form an alliance. We're not frontline conservation people, but what we can do is create awareness, firstly, and we can create an umbrella or a conduit for funds to get through to those guys who are on the front line that simply don't have the time to get out and market themselves, or, they're so busy fighting poachers or chasing leads on illicit wildlife trade. And there are a lot of really, really good outfits that are out there who you simply just don't know about. And so we wanted to do two things. One, create awareness for them and sort of be a voice for conservation. And two, set ourselves up as a fully fledged not-for-profit where we can receive funds and send those out to those that deserve it on the front line. So, right here in Victoria Falls, we've got the Victoria Falls Anti-Poaching Unit. In Matusodana, we've got the Boomy Hills Anti-Poaching Unit. These are just a couple of examples. But Jess, who's here on the call with us as well, she is our outreach manager. She has been, in the last couple of weeks, contacting a whole bunch of frontline or downstream partners that are doing some incredible work and need help. So tourism dollars that were coming in were helping these frontline organizations significantly. But as there are no tourists coming in, the problem has, expanded.
Everyone just been absolutely loving everything you got me. Yeah, thanks. Just for saying thanks so much to Ivan. Yeah, really love everyone what you're doing, and it's great to be connected. And living here in Australia, you definitely do feel a little bit disconnected. So as Luke and Robin were saying, just forming this whole thing and bringing everyone together and the awareness, it definitely gives me goosebumps, and like I said, not only just for these games but going forward and into the future as well. It'd be awesome to stick together and keep plugging away at it, and trying to create funds. And the one question I had for Ivan was I've got 2 young kids, and we do a little school program here, and they all want to come to Africa, in the future, and hopefully when all this stuff dies down. But do you offer any things like educational things for kids, like programs, or where you can set up things where we could bring a whole bunch of, I don't know, to 20 kids or that, where we could create something where they could come along and just a whole educational trip for them to experience these non-profit organizations that you do, would be able to visit these places and obviously contributing towards it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Cara. In fact, one of the ways that we do a lot of what we do is when we've got a big initiative going, we'll actually have people come and participate. So absolutely, that's definitely a possibility. So let's message back and forth on the group, and we can certainly get some ideas sent your way. But I think that we've all at that age where we've either got kids or thinking about kids, or some of us have got kids that have already left. But the reality is, the stuff that we love to do, we inherently want our kids to love as well. And so there's nothing more important in my mind than including kids in a conservation initiative, and teaching them and getting them aware and getting them excited about it, because otherwise who are we going to pass the torch to in the next generation if we do a great job of conserving our wildlife, but we haven't done a great job of educating kids on how to do the same? Then it's for no reason,
I'll ask a question, Tina. Is the animal population going down, or are we going up? And I ask that question because obviously, like the black rhino in the Zambezi Valley went from 500 in 1984 to literally 10 years later. Is our elephant population going down?
One of the sad things about wildlife around the world is that people don't feel like wildlife belongs to anyone. So even in a flea around Harare, there's might be a pair of reedbuck there. No one feels like they're stealing if they kill that reedbuck to eat. They feel like it's fair game, when in fact wildlife should belong to somebody, because then that way people are going to be bound and determined to look after it. And I always use a good example, and sorry if this is a little bit of a longer way around to answering your question. What is the difference between popping over the boundary of Mana Pools just to kill an impala versus stealing a chicken out of the fridge at Pick and Pay? It's the same thing. And so really, when you look at it, the short answer is we saw quite a big crash in wildlife population across Zimbabwe when things were really, really bad. But what's happening right now today is you've got a lot of NGOs that are coming in. You've got Park Recovery Fund, you've got WWF, you've got a lot of these big ones that aren't necessarily the be all and the end all. In fact, a lot of the big ones use more money on admin than actually gets to the ground. But the reality is parks like Chiserera, parks like Gonorrhea have seen an influx of these private not-for-profits that have really stabilized their anti-poaching, and you're seeing the wildlife make quite a distinct comeback. But then you look at properties like the Savi Valley Conservancy and Booby Valley Conservancy. Now those places have seen absolutely massive increase in wildlife populations because they're in private hands, they're privately managed, they're well looked after, their communities benefit strongly from the wildlife being healthy. And so it's horses for courses. And so really when you look at it, I think one of the most important things that we have to consider with regard to conservation is making sure that we include local communities in our solutions. As far as the costs of these national parks, Frankfurt Zoological still funds the conservation management in the Ngorongoro crater. And if you take the Ngorongoro crater as a patch of Africa, there is no more lucrative patch of Africa for wildlife. It has over 1 million tourists a year. Each one of those are paying at least $100 to get in there. That's $100 million for an area that's only 17 miles across. And you look at that and you say, well, why would they need aid? Well, the reason they need aid is because they, why would they perform well and lose the aid? And so it becomes this non-conservation conversation, and that's where the not-for-profits coming in actually are helping a lot to stabilize a lot of that stuff, because they're putting a lot of measures in place where they're even controlling some of the revenue.
Yeah, thanks. Ivan, I wanted to ask, in your profession, do you find that often there's people that are conservationists or self-proclaimed conservationists that are obtaining funds and stuff, and in their efforts, they're actually being more detrimental to the ecosystem than, they could be?
No, absolutely. And Ryan, I think that there's a term that we use, effective conservationists. And so being effective means you have to have a measurable impact. And having a measurable impact means that, you've got to understand it before you measure it, and you've got to measure it before you know if you've impacted it. And so, as I said in kind of the opening statement, I think that the only way to really measure whether you're impactful is, did your effort result in more wildlife and a healthier ecosystem? More wildlife is not necessarily good impact, but a healthier ecosystem is the most important impact you can have.
Oh, I just wanted to ask Ivan, just in terms of hunting, you hear, tourists come out to hunt an elephant or hunt a lion, and but it's okay, they're paying $30,000 to come and hunt this elephant. But what are they actually? But you say, oh, it's okay because that money goes back into conservation. In reality, what are the numbers? Would you say if it was 30 grand for an elephant, what should be going back into conservation from that kill?
So here's a really interesting point, Cara, is hunting is not necessarily conservation, but it's that money flow. And so let me back up, and I'll go back out to 60,000 feet here, and we can look down on the entire scenario. You all are well aware of, I don't know if it's got a different name in other parts of the world, but what an endowment fund is. It's where you put some money away and you only ever use the interest. So let us look at a wildlife population as an endowment fund. So that wildlife population, if you never touch your principal, you never touch the core population, but the interest that generates every year is the old bulls that are beyond breeding, that actually have no biological effect if they are to be removed. That's got to be your quota. So for example, with buffalo, your quota on a buffalo herd will usually be about 1%. And so you're not going to impact at all your core population if that 1% of offtake is old animals. And so then you say, okay, well then how does it affect conservation? So a guy comes out and he wants to shoot a buffalo or a lion or an elephant, whatever it might be. That money is spent, and the outfitter, by virtue of wanting to have his area healthy, he has to spend a certain proportion on anti-poaching. Now that's going to vary according to the country you're in, according to the species that exist on your concession, but he's got to run anti-poaching. And most of the good outfitters will have a very significant anti-poaching unit. The meat that is generated from it will go to the community. So the system that we have in our project in Mozambique is, last year we distributed 66 tons of meat. But the way we distributed it, we have 1,200 people that live in the area, and they're on a roster. So they get literally a Land Cruiser load of free meat every 10 days. But if they are caught poaching, or even a family member is caught poaching, they lose their free meat for 2 months. Then there's government fees that come into it, which are significant. Probably 40% of everything you pay actually goes to government. And again, even if the government is not putting it back into the area, I'm quite fine with that, because the government is seeing this money as coming from its wildlife. And so with a bit of hope and luck, the government is going to say, well, we don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. We must look after our wildlife because it generates all this money.
So, Hilton, I will give you the last question or contribution before we wrap up.
Cool, thanks. Ivan, just going back to the comment you made about the 40% that goes towards the government, does that vary in different countries, or is that like a standard kind of percentage?
So you'll pay $60,000 a year to government just for the right to get to your concession. Then for every hunter that comes in, you'll pay about $1,500 a hunter, $1,500 a hunter for his license. Then you have to pay a couple of $100 a day for him to be in your camp. And then you have to buy him a license for each animal he takes, which in the case of something like a lion might be as high as $5,000 or $6,000. For something like a buffalo, it might be $1,500. And so by the time that guy goes home, and so so a guy who comes to hunt a lion in Tanzania, as well as a bunch of other species, is probably going to spend in excess of $100,000. But you're going to take your $60,000 concession fee, and you're going to look at your quota, and you're going to say, okay, each year I'm allowed to have 1 lion, 2 leopards, 10 buffalo, 11 kudu, 20 impala, and a warthog. That's the quota they give you. You then decide what you have to charge for that to cover the government fees and to make the money to build your camp and have your vehicles and your hunters and your salaries and all of that, and to make some profit. And so really, when you look at it, at a time like now in COVID-19, there's not a single tourist in Africa, anywhere in Africa today, not one. So Kruger Park, that has 1 million tourists a year, doesn't have a single tourist in it. It hasn't had for 2 months. There's not a single hunting outfitter that's got a tourist on the front line. Yet when it opens, and this is not really answering your question, it's just a point, I can guarantee you it'll be the hunters that come back first, because they're an individual that's got a very specific reason to go to a very specific place in pursuit of a very specific thing, and prepared to pay a lot of money to do so. You never get people saying, well, how much community benefit comes from a photographic lodge? You never get people saying, well, how much of the photographic lodge money is being spent on anti-poaching? And a lot of the photographic lodges have no anti-poaching. And so really, when you look at it, it's an unequal playing field, because something has to die in the hunting in the pursuit of hunting. The fact that something has to die overshadows all of the sensibilities, because of that, the emotional impact that has on a viewer, a reader, or in a conversation. It's the fact that something has to die that topples over the public perception of what that activity is.
I just want to take this time just to thank everyone on the front line for everything that they're doing. Just on behalf of Team Lions, we really appreciate everything that you're doing. And I thought we'd just give them a round of applause for everything that they're doing. So we thank you so much.
Yes, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivan. Thank you very much for your wealth of knowledge, and of course, giving up your time to help educate us on conservation. To the viewers, thank you very much for being with us once again. Don't be afraid to go onto www.zambezia.com. You can see all the wonderful work that people are doing with conservation in the Zambezia region. And of course, there's a few options for you if you so wish to support the cause of conservation in the region.
Our wildlife needs help. Tourism to Africa is at an all-time low. You can assist by liking and sharing the conservation games. You can contribute financially by hitting the donate button on the Zambezia.com website. Let's get together and back up the frontline conservation team.